This episode is brought to you by DeSanto Propane. DeSanto has been serving the energy needs of upstate New York since 1937. They're a fourth-generation family-owned business that has prioritized dependability, reliability, and integrity. If you have energy needs, call DeSanto and tell them we sent you. Visit DeSantoPropane.com to learn more. And by the Fox family of dealerships on Route 5 in Auburn. Check out their vast inventory of new and used cars by visiting foxdealerships.com. Good morning and welcome back to Inside the FLX. Today we are previewing an event taking shape this weekend in the heart of the Finger Lakes. Women March in Seneca Falls is in its fourth year and has grown from one-day event to 3 days for the first time this year. That's exciting news, and to discuss everything going on this weekend in Seneca Falls, we have Susan Scheuerman in studio. Susan, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate the time.
Oh, of course. Delighted to be here.
You must be one of the busiest people in the Finger Lakes in the days leading up to it. Walk me through what you guys are sort of going through now in sort of the final hours of prep.
Sure. Well, it's all in the details, as you know. Ideas are only as good as they can be carried out. So we are now carrying out many ideas that over the last year, actually, we have been forming and talking about. And so now we all have responsibilities for these last couple of days before the Saturday rally in March. So we're busy. We find that we have a lot of support for the march and the rally this year. And of course, it is the celebration of our 100th anniversary of our right to vote. Although that is a national event, New York State, however, granted women the right to vote in 1917. So New York State was a couple of years ahead of the game. But nationally, it is the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the right to vote for women. So it is an epic event this year.
Put that into perspective for us, because I think it's interesting. You've got that, the 100th anniversary. You have the march, and then you also have an election year. It's an election year at the same time, and sort of all three sort of culminating together. Right. Walk us through what that means for you guys, and just maybe some of that extra thought and energy that you naturally had to be put into it.
Sure. The mission of Women March Seneca Falls was and continues to be the spirit of uplifting the status of women. We are a nonpartisan group. We welcome everyone, and we certainly have held true to our principle and our mission for the last 4 years. This is our fourth annual march. And so because it falls in the year 2020, which, as you said, is a convergent year of several big events, we have called it an epic event here in Seneca Falls. And what better place to start a national conversation about uplifting the status of women in the United States than to hold it where it all began in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848. So we are really very fortunate that we live where we live. And I think that the 3-day event kind of touches on all of those activist and spiritual, I'll say for want of a better word, but those kinds of things that women are looking for in 2020 in a candidate. Mm-hmm. We have a roster of candidates. We don't know yet who will be running against our current president. We do know that we need to support a candidate, regardless of party, who will reinforce all of those rights that women have fought hard to win.
So let's talk a little bit about the theme and what that process was like for you guys as you worked through coming to that conclusion of what the theme would be for this event. What was that process like? How many people were involved? What kind of discussions were taking place? And how do you pinpoint on one when I'm sure there were dozens and dozens probably of great ideas.
Yeah, well, we are a core group, all women, approximately 15 of us, who have banded together for the last 4 years. And once we are all convening again to talk about the next march and rally, the juices start flowing. And this year it was pretty easy because we did designate Seneca Falls as the epicenter of all the national celebrations of the 100th anniversary of our right to vote. So the theme came pretty easily. Voting and getting out and voting is really the theme of this rally and march. We think that everyone needs to be reminded that this right to vote is not something that we can kind of brush off and do or not do. We have a responsibility living in this country to exercise that right. And for us as women, we had to earn that right. It wasn't given to us based on gender as it was to men. And so the conversation this year came pretty easily about what our focus would be and who we wanted to be at the march. And so with that in mind, we started last January and have worked for a whole year to get this ready.
Now, as you guys have moved through the process, I would assume over the years it's gotten a little bit easier as you guys have gotten march after march under your belt organizing. What has that process been like for you guys this year compared to past years? Notice anything different about how you guys went about organizing it? Obviously, organizing a 3-day event is more difficult or more challenging, I'd assume, than one day. Walk us through some of those changes.
Well, the first thing I have to say on behalf of our committee is that the Seneca Falls community has embraced us and our grassroots efforts to showcase women in Seneca Falls every January for the last now 4 Januaries it'll be. And all of the partners we have in Seneca Falls have, including the police, community people, have all risen to the occasion to help us make sure that this is not only a healthy atmosphere, but that it's a safe atmosphere. So we are really, truly appreciative of everything that the community has done for us so that we are able to hold this event for the 4th year in a row. This year we decided that we wanted to include a partner, Auburn Public Theater, in Auburn, New York, because we really live in central New York. We really live in a corridor of human rights. And of course, Auburn and Harriet Tubman and William Seward and all of those people who came before us should be announced during this weekend. So we partnered with Auburn Public Theater and also the Equal Rights Heritage Center as our kickoff on Friday, the 17th of January, to hold a reception at the Equal Rights Heritage Center from 5:30 till 7:30, and then to go walk to Auburn Public Theater to hear Holly Near in concert at 8 o'clock. Holly Near, of course, being an activist and well-known in that community. And we are a sold-out audience for that performance. So we knew the rally and march on Saturday would be held again in Seneca Falls. And we held it last year at Trinity Park and found that to be very successful in spite of some of the bad weather. And this year we're holding it there again. We have shortened it so that we begin at 12:30. We have a couple of really good speakers to kick us off, so to speak, and then we march. Mm-hmm. We march approximately a mile through the community, and then when we disband, we will head up to this building where I am now and listen to a great concert by a group called Betty, who are really an activist group from Canada who will be performing here at 4 o'clock. On Sunday, we have a wonderful, wonderful opportunity by bringing 7 women together who will hold an epic conversation that will be held at the First Presbyterian Church. And we will also be showcasing our sculptress who did a wonderful rendition of, now I can't remember her name now. Who is it? That was our wonderful proponent of the ERA, Alice Paul. How could I forget Alice Paul's name? But we will be unveiling a bust that was commissioned for this event, and Alice Paul actually presented this idea of an Equal Rights Amendment in 1923 at the First Presbyterian Church in Seneca Falls. So we actually have her podium in the church. So it's appropriate that we would have an unveiling of her bust there. So, and then we'll hold an epic conversation talking about several questions to do with what 2020 voting year does look like for us in the United States. So it's a packed weekend for sure.
And excuse me, as far as part of this, it seems every year the theme is to keep the conversation going. What are some of the ways that you hope the conversation continues after the weekend is over and as obviously we continue through 2020? Well,
I think the people who come and participate in this event, and, you know, we've had years where our highest attendance year, we had 15,000 people come to the March and Rally. We hope that they leave here and take back with them all of the energy to encourage their community to get out the vote this year. That is the main focus of this year's March and Rally and all of the events, is to get out the vote in 2020. We cannot sit home. We have earned it, and we need to promote it, and that's really what we hope we are energizing the people who attend to go back to their communities and do this, get the vote out.
And how do you, I guess I want to go a little deeper on that, because that seems to be, as somebody who covers politics for a living, it seems that getting voters energized and keeping them energized, if there were an answer to that, it would be the secret sauce to all elections. How do you hope that this conversation continues? Or I should say, what do you think is the best conversation starter to sort of re-engage, re-energize folks so that they are thinking the right way heading into 2020?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if there's one answer that would fit that question. I think it has to do with how people view politics in our country and how they understand the process. It's sort of like making sausage. You don't really want to know all the details, but the product is pretty good. And in some ways, politics is like that. It's very different. It's a very different species from running the country, is this issue of politics. So I think that people need to understand that the way the society is now, in order to run for office, you have to have support monetarily. And I think that may discourage people from jumping in. But what I would say to that is find a candidate, learn about that candidate who you think you have an interest in. Find out what makes them tick. Find out what their record is. Have a conversation with them, and then jump in and help them get elected if you really believe that that person is the right candidate for the job.
So, taking the personal tact on this one, what does this year mean to you personally, as someone who's been through this process now a few times? What does 2020 mean to you in this particular March?
Yeah. Well, I recently ran for office where I live, and I lost. I lost to a woman. There were 2 women running, which was great. Still, a loss is a loss. I didn't like losing. And I learned a lot, though, by running for office in the kinds of skills you need to engage your voters. And so, to me, the 2020 election has some personal meaning in the sense of I'm delighted that there are women who have put themselves out there to, hopefully be chosen as a candidate to run for office. I'm personally delighted to see that. I think 2020 is can be a pivotal year. We've had 4 years that at times are not particularly encouraging to women, and I'm hoping that 2020 will not discourage all of the women who have the right to vote now to come forward and vote. I think our schools need to make sure that 16 and 17-year-olds in New York State can now be registered to vote at 18. I hope that our schools will jump in and make sure that that happens. And so I think it has to be a national crusade to make sure that we've done everything we can to help get elected the person or persons we think who are qualified to do the job. And that's an important responsibility. I don't think we can turn away from it, and I hope we don't turn away from it.
I want to follow up with that because I think you brought up a really important point. Frequently, I've heard, hosting this show for more than 200 episodes now, that there aren't enough women in local office, and I have to agree. Seeing the rosters of many town boards, village boards, city councils, etc. What do we have to do as a society, as a culture, whatever the case may be, to see to it that more women are actively running for office and supported through the process?
Yeah, it's a fairly new phenomenon, actually, in our society. It has taken on, a deeper meaning as of the last probably 10 or 15 years. I still think women struggle with the idea that they can be leaders, that they have other things pulling at them. I think the message we give to our boys and then our men is that it's a clear path for them to go from A to Z and run for office. There's nothing in between. For women, there are a lot of opportunities to not run for office. There are other things that can get in the way because we are not and have not been conditioned to think that we are leaders. That is changing. I see that that's changing. There are opportunities now for women to learn about running for office that there weren't 10 years ago. There are courses you can take. There's curriculums being designed and developed to be used in our schools that allow girls to think about themselves in leadership positions early on in life and not later on in life. Mm-hmm. So all of these things will take a little bit of time, but I see where they are being encouraged, women are being encouraged, and girls to think of themselves in leadership roles. And for me, it took a longer time for me to come forward and be able to do that. But once I did, I understood that that was something that gender should never have been an issue about. It just never should be. So I think it's a very hopeful society in that sense right now, where we are encouraging both genders almost equally to run. We're still, very low in our numbers, as you say, of elected females. And so that will change as we get more girls and then women into the pipeline to run for office. So those are all good things.
What was that moment like for you, if I may ask, when you sort of had that light bulb sort of go off where you're like, this never should have been gender should never have entered into this equation at all. What was that sort of mind change like for you personally?
Well, I think that I realized that if you are able to assess yourself in what you're good at, it looked to me like, once I sat down and did that it looked to me like, oh, I had the skills that you need to run for office and then be elected and do the job. But I knew enough, and I think that mentoring, having somebody who I could turn to and ask questions about, a female who had run for office and been elected, was very important for me. And I had that connection. I was able to do that. And I think now that I've run for office, I would like to act as a mentor to somebody else thinking about running for office, another woman, because all of the things I learned when I was running, I'd like to be able to transfer to somebody else. So I'm not so sure there was a point in time. It just seemed to me that I had the qualifications without anybody really telling me that. Whereas I think boys are told repeatedly that they're, by virtue of the fact that they're men, that they're male, that they have the qualifications. But girls aren't given that message.
When you look at a community like Seneca Falls, which will host this for the fourth consecutive year, what does an event like this in expanded form mean for the community, and what kind of impact that can have?
That's a good question. What Seneca Falls has done, I grew up here. I was born here. It's my home. I went to St. Patrick's School. I was graduated from Minders Academy. My mother was graduated from this building we're in. So my roots go back deep to this community. And when I was growing up, the corner where the Wesleyan Chapel replication now sits was a laundromat. And there would be women in there using it. And I can remember even having a discussion with my mother about that seemed kind of interesting, since there was a big commemorative New York State sign that said it was the birthplace of women's rights. So there was irony even at that point for me to see. I think I've watched this community actually embrace women's rights, embrace the history that it's always had, that it has expanded it on a national level with our wonderful Women's Rights Park and the Elizabeth Cady Stanton home. I was here when Alan Alda came to town in the 70s with my mom. We went down and heard him speak, and he gave the first $10,000 to restore the Elizabeth Cady Stanton house. So since 1976, and now we're 2020, the town certainly has become known for what its history was all about. And I think they will continue to expand, and the Hall of Fame, the Women's Hall of Fame, now down at the old knitting mill, and the idea of using that as a conference center for women, I think we're really going to make the map, so to speak.
Now, obviously heading through this weekend and then into the rest of 2020, it seems that a lot of the theme is sort of engineered around ensuring that voices are heard, ensuring that more voices are heard. What do you hope the biggest takeaway is for those who might just be catching in now? What do you hope the biggest takeaway is from this weekend in terms of ensuring that more voices are heard?
I think to revisit our First Amendment rights, every opportunity we have is very important, and that's what we're doing this weekend. We have those rights from birth. We are very fortunate to have First Amendment rights, and so the idea that we can come out and we can speak without fear of reprisal, that we can organize, that we can send a message that we are looking out for each other, that we are trying to make a difference, pays off. Mm-hmm. That's a hard message not to expand upon in your own life. I think this idea of paying back for what we've been given in this country, that this voting rights thing should not be taken for granted, and I know I've said that several times in this interview, but you cannot take it for granted. It is a wonderful place to live, this country of ours, and we take these freedoms sometimes for granted, which we should not. So a reminder is a good thing. Mm-hmm. And this weekend is that reminder of all that we are capable of, all that we've done. We have a legacy to carry on, and that's what we need to do.
And where folks can catch up if they would like to online with you guys, I'm assuming there's a website for the march itself and the weekend's events?
Yes, there is certainly a website that I'm going to give you here if I can find it. We have our Facebook page, Women March Seneca Falls.
Okay. Is
our Facebook page, and all of our information, all our links
Beautiful.
Are on that.
Awesome.
Good.
Susan, thanks so much for the time. Thanks for coming in.
This has been terrific. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the march.
Absolutely. We'll be there. Thanks for joining us this hour on Inside the FLX. I'm Josh Durso, and we'll be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, download the FingerLakes1.com app to have the latest local breaking news, alerts, and podcasts delivered right to your hand each and every day. Follow and subscribe to the show on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. If you enjoy the program and can support us, head over to patreon.com/FL1 to pledge monthly support. If you have an idea for a show or simply want to let your voice be heard, drop us an email or leave us a voice message by visiting InsideTheFLX.com. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you back here next week.